Pew, 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 pew. All right, good morning, artists. Thanks for joining me in the studio again. Today we're going to talk about how you can improve your artwork when drawing guns, how to get better at it. Some tips and tricks that I use personally to make my artwork that incorporates firearms a little more believable. All right, a lot of times trying to incorporate mechanical objects, especially ones as specific as firearms, into your artwork can be quite a challenge for artists out there. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of mechanical complexity, there's a lot of planes and surfaces, there's a lot of cuts, there's a lot of machining, and there's a lot of integral parts that work together in conjunction with one another to make a functional and believable firearm. I will say this, if you have real firearms in your home and you're going to be using them as reference, which is one of my suggestions, don't be stupid, okay? Don't be stupid. This is real. This is real stuff. This is grown-up stuff. Put your big kid pants on and let's do this. So there's something really cool about dynamic characters and dynamic situations or exciting situations or action situations using firearms. It's just part of our culture. It's part of all culture. It's part of all entertainment culture. Firearms and guns, whether it's war or law enforcement settings or self-defense or, you know, Yakuza, that kind of thing. It's, you know, whatever, mafia, all the good stuff. The entertainment industry thrives on guns. Today there's a lot more of that incorporated into artwork than there may have been in the Renaissance period and stuff like that. But still, you had a lot of weaponry incorporated throughout history in almost all artwork genres. In earlier years, it just happened to be swords and knives and stuff like that, and cannon and horses and that kind of thing. Technically complex things, not really horses, well, they're kind of biomechanically complex, so they're hard to draw too. Weaponry and arms and armor and swords and all that stuff has been the subject of artwork forever. So a lot of these tools and techniques and stuff that I'm going to talk about today can actually apply directly to other types of swords and armor and weaponry, not just firearms. If you look at a lot of the anime genres and stuff like that, I mean, this is just basically a gigantic gun-carrying object. The anime Gundam, you know this is a Gundam. This is a gigantic mobile weapon platform. That's all it is. There's a lot of technical parts on this type of thing. There's a lot of structural elements and intertwining mechanical objects going on here. So all these tools and techniques we're going to talk about today can apply directly to this. I will say this, across the board, if you understand the basics of the mechanics of what actually makes a firearm function, you'll have a much better understanding of how to build, construct, or invent firearms, even if they're fantastical in nature, like what you would see in Halo and stuff like that. Fantastical in nature firearms, once you understand the basic structure of a firearm better. Here's the key points. You need a handle by which the user can grasp the weapon. You need the interface by which the user can engage and operate the weapon, meaning a trigger, and your hammer or something similar to that nature, magazine well, or somewhere to put, place, or impart the ammo into the functional device. And you need the barrel, this part that makes the ammo or the propellant or the laser beams or whatever it is go in the direction that the user wants them to go. Those are the basics of a firearm. All right, without further ado, let's jump into the canvas, and then I'm going to put some stylus to the plastic and see if we can't work out how to draw guns and firearms better. Right, first and foremost, when trying to draw firearms accurately, if it's a historical firearm, I believe there needs to be an element of accuracy sought in representing it in its form, function, and design as it was designed, and the way it's designed. I think it's important to get it right. My personal favorite method for doing this is actually using personal imagery, like shooting your own reference of the firearm type that you want to portray your character having, and shooting it in the orientation or from the perspective that you need it to be. And I'll give this example first. This is one I recently shot for this image right here. So I'm working on this image. I needed the firearm. I wanted the character to have a pistol on her side, kind of a common, combative type of pistol, which is a 1911, which I actually happen to own, which is the beautiful thing. If you happen to own the firearm, it's much easier to do this. So I shot a picture of it, and I straight up traced that sucker right here. I will do that for firearms pretty regularly. If I'm going to draw a picture of something and I need it to be specific, and it is a firearm, and I have one, or I have access to one through a friend or whatever, I will shoot it and photograph it in the manner I need it to be in the position and perspective, and then I'll trace that sucker without shame, because even tracing it, you're going to get a lot of inconsistencies, but it's just quicker. It's a quicker and I think smarter way to work. If you think that that's a blasphemous thing, then okay, go ahead, move it off to the side and don't trace it. Just try to redraw it the best you can, which I have done in some circumstances as well. So that's my number one suggestion, is if you can find the reference that you need, then shoot that reference yourself, photograph it, borrow it from a friend, whatever, go to a gun store, that kind of thing, and just photograph it, or like a gun show. But if you live in a place that doesn't allow that kind of stuff, or where you're really restrictive, or especially if you can't find the type of firearm you may want to use, then you're going to have to seek alternatives. So some of the key takeaways I want to reiterate right up front with this whole thing, no matter the process or where you're getting your reference or whatever, is position, perspective, lighting, and form function. That's what you need to capture with a firearm. Now, I've been very fortunate in that I used to build custom guns for a living, and I have a pretty extensive library of my own collection, so I can shoot and use as reference a lot of different types of firearms, and I can kind of mash together what I need, even if I'm making something fantastical. The other method I've used in the past is actually 3D modeling. I've used ZBrush. This is one of the firearms I modeled in ZBrush probably over a decade ago. Just my kind of take on a semi-futuristic, really large caliber bolt-action sniper rifle used for like anti-material, almost even anti-aircraft. So I took some reference from the internet that I'd looked at, some similar style chassis and rifle, and then I created this model in ZBrush. That way that I could position it and get the lighting correct on it for any use going forward after that, where I may need to use this as a model. I also did the same for fantasy weapons. So this is like a fantasy grenade launcher that I used on a character I did for a ZBrush course in college. And I took the foundation of a realistic grenade launcher concept and turned it into my own thing and made up this entire thing, but I stuck to the functional basics that I understood just in weaponry, as so far as a pistol, meaning a grip, the interface with the trigger and everything. How does the user actually manipulate the weapon? Magazines, how do you get ammunition into the weapon? Cycling and operations, bolts and barrels and that kind of thing. So here's the barrel, here's the receiver, here's the bolt, magazine release, trigger, and handguard, or a pistol grip. So you have realistically what looks like a functional weapon, even if it's completely fantastical. This other example is one I made just for the fun of it. Actually, I just wanted to say, hey, I like revolvers, and I like pistols and stuff like that. I like rifles, I like them all. But this one based on the concept of an amalgamation of several different pistols I had seen online or had or used or whatever, and I just kind of made my fantasy or futuristic version of it. And that's really helpful if you have access to a 3D modeling program that you can do that, or even a free one like Blender or something like that. You can get 3D models that you can use as reference for firearms, and even if you're not sticking exactly to that reference, you can use it as a good foundation. Now, when it comes to historical firearms, stuff that are iconic and easily recognizable, I would highly recommend just finding photographic reference of it, especially if you don't live in a place or you're not in the situation where you can access any firearms. Then I would find historical reference online. There's a vast library online, stuff like this. This is the old James Bond pistol, the Walther PPK. It's very iconic. It's very recognizable because of the shape, form, and function of it. You need to find reference accurate to that if you're going to be representing that specific firearm. Going down the more historical path as well, like this is, find images of the mechanisms, find images of what actually makes the functional elements of a firearm, and given its category and its time frame too. This is a muzzle loading musket from way back in the day, so this is a common mechanism for the muzzle loaders and how they actually operated. And if you get these parts right, you're going to have a believable looking story. You're going to have a believable looking character. Here's some more historical reference of muzzle loaders, and you can take stuff like this and then you can mishmash ideas into something like this. This is just a random image I pulled off of a fantasy rifle online, and this is very obvious. Structurally looks and mechanically looks like it could actually function, and it has elements in it that are based off of real world firearms, or at least alludes to real world firearms, so that it looks functional. It looks like something you could actually use. So let's talk about doing this from the ground up though. Let's say you don't have reference specifically to what you want. You can't find exactly what you want. And you want to create your own kind of fantasy thing. Well, There's a lot of cool guns in the world. A lot of stuff that's iconic to police and law enforcement and stuff like that, and they're easy to recognize, and I would use that. But say you want that as a foundation and you want to create your own kind of thing, then here's how I would do it. Here's how I would break it down to use, let's say we're going to use this reference as a way to create your own firearm type. First and foremost, I'm going to use this as a mechanical foundation. Mechanical foundation for the firearm that I want to build, but I'm going to turn it into something more fantasy, sci-fi, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to do that just by starting to sketch in some of my own ideas here. Let's say we like the pistol grip, but we want to add maybe a little bit of a more of an angle here to give it more futuristic look. This is a rough sketching phase, so we're just going to come in here and kind of use this foundation, the mechanical, parts of it that are accurate, as a foundation for building our own idea. That's cool. I like that pistol grip a little better, and I might actually block in. Let's get my hard airbrush out here, and let's block in some shapes just to see. Let's say we've got. So we need to understand functionally, where's the barrel? Right here. Okay, so I'm going to put myself a line here. I'm going to build myself a line to go off of for the barrel. So that you have, at the very least, a functional foundation so far as the mechanical operation of the weapon. So you have your bolt up here, your barrel is here, magazine is here, and that feeds weapon rounds into the chamber here. They go down there. So I want to block in this is just a rough in phase. Like, okay, we'd add that. Maybe there's a little device up here or the linking device for the barrel. Maybe the barrel sticks out a little bit more, so we're gonna have to block that shape in. All right. And since I'm a cool guy, I'm gonna make this a really neat looking suppressor. Let's add some flare to the back end here. As long as you stick to kind of the mechanical foundation, you're gonna end up with a weapon that's believable. And right here, what you see me doing to do straight lines, which really comes in handy when it comes to doing firearms, is the ability to do straight lines. So let me take my pen, I'm gonna lower the size down to like 4 to make a straight line in Clip Studio. And straight lines come into play so much when you're doing a firearm. Even if you're not tracing it, if you're just redrawing it, this is the way to go. You tap once, you shift and drag over here, and you can tap in again and make a straight line. And you can make it whatever thickness, the max thickness of your pen, your pencil, your painting device that you have, your painting tool you have selected, based on your numbers over here. So if I usually draw, say, at like a 17, that gives me some line width variability. But if I try to do the straight line, click, shift, and click, I'm gonna get a really fat line. So keep that in mind when you're drawing, and set your pencil or your pen or whatever your tool up appropriately before you draw that line, so you're not ending up with too fat of lines. But right now we're just concepting. So all right, so I've got this cool looking little shape there for my suppressor, and maybe I've got some striations on it. So shift, drag, click. Say I've got some air cooling vents or something. I don't know. I'm just concepting an idea right now. Just putting in some block shapes just to see how it goes. All right, so we got a rail up here up top, and say I want to put an optic on it. Let's put a red dot style optic, just kind of making up a red dot. Now a red dot optic is something that basically has a diopter in here that projects a red dot or green dot onto a piece of glass in this open window. It's like a frame here you can see through. You see that dot, you put it on target, pew pew pew, life is good. So you need the screen and diopter projection and the body housing for your batteries, and then you have your attachment points for your Picatinny rail here. So this is going to be kind of a larger, goes down here, clips onto that rail. And it really is easier to do firearms if you actually understand how they mechanically and functionally operate, and how the interfaces operate with the different like accoutrements and all the stuff you can put on them, like the optics and stuff like that. If you have a better understanding of that, or you can at least go look at it in a store or whatever and kind of get an idea, take some photos. There we go, simple red dot, one attachment point on the Picatinny here. There we go. So got some blocks going on. I've cooled up this a little bit. Let's add a I don't like this back end here, so I'm gonna add an actual buttstock to it, like a shortened buttstock. So understanding that the cheek weld on these things is kind of low, I want to be down here. And then we have our shoulder. And this is just blocking out some big shapes here. We're going to make this a folding stock attachment. So we're going to fold somewhere in here, like that. Got a good foundation that mechanically welds it, or, affixes it to the actual weapon. And then maybe put like an attachment point here for a sling or whatever. We'll work that out. So, with a little bit of information, just a little bit of fooling around, we've already got the basics of the information we need for our brand new customized Super Ninja gun. And honestly, at this point, I would just straight up trace the rest of this, because this is so mechanically complex, and the pieces of it need to be so precise for it to make sense as a weapon. But if I was going off the rails, full fantasy style, then I would just start drawing this in by hand and maybe tweaking lines here and there, like I did with the pistol grip here. Really is what you can do. You can go either way with it, and I really see no shame in, with something this complex, actually just tracing what you can if you found the reference on your own. Now, if it's artwork of another person, or it's the imagery of another person, I wouldn't really do it. I may use it as a reference, but I wouldn't trace it. Let's just think about it functionally, though. That's my even if you're gonna go, let's go in here and make some sci-fi out of this. So say I'm gonna add some little light laser beam indicator on the side here. That's what this is. We're gonna make a little light indicator on the side here. So this is an LED style readout for your magazine capacity or whatever. Let's call it that. It's got a pretty neat profile, but maybe I'll add some. Once you get this blocked in, your actual profile here, which I'm not going to do this entire image because I'd be here for 3 hours. But once you block in the image, the planes, the profile, and the mechanical aspects, the rest of it's just detailing and lighting. The lighting can be really simple on something like this. If you look at it, basically you have color tone or value tone here, value tone here, darker, with a little bit of darker, way darker in the back here. Then you have your undercut shadow here, a semi-shadow, and then your highlights all up here, And most weapons, depending on what you're drawing, aren't actually super shiny when you look at them. They're not gleaming, glowing in the sun type of thing. Let's add something a little more subtle for the pistol grip here, going down into the magazine well. Maybe even drop the magazine well down just a bit to give me some room. I'm kind of deviating now from historical accuracy into science fiction, fantasy, dystopian interpretation. Overall, it's becoming a pretty believable science fiction fantasy version of what is a modern weapon, or a known or contemporary real firearm out there in use. Turning it into something cooler at least. Let's key points here. Think functionality, perspective, mechanics, planes, surfaces, values. And really, to capture a firearm, you need to capture what a firearm is: trigger, grip, barrel, furniture, silhouette. This is the silhouette. Trigger, grip, furniture. So that's all this extra stuff. And let's not forget the receiver. That's the housing for the main parts and components of a firearm that make it function. Also furniture. And my last point, shoot your own reference and trace it if you own it. All right, thank you for joining me again today. I hope you learned something. I hope that helps you out there. Look up reference. I will say that reference is huge. And when it comes to some really technically complex aspects of realistic firearms, brother, I will trace that crap in a heartbeat if I have shot the reference myself or I can obtain my own reference in some way. All right, so thank you for joining me again. Y'all be blessed and happy creating.